Okay, so this is a really powerful MVP that I created here that explains, or the first pass at trying to connect the key elements and the key sort of components of a paragraph, in this case, Article 9, but I'll show a couple of other examples of this. And the point here is that when we say, for example, the risk management should be understood by a continuous iterative process, all of these words matter. So if you think about it, what we now have here is I can click on it and I can say, what's the definition of it? What's the definition of the industry? Where they grab that, and also how the components are. In here, we even go further to map out what is risk, what is management, what's system, because each of these has components, has definitions, right? And you can see that also the edges we connect. So we now connect in this risk management system to these other edges that exist here. But the same thing with continuous iterative process. So you could see, that each of these now is connected to is big, right? So intent and purpose, right? So all of this stuff is we start to capture now. What do we mean by these particular definitions? And then we start to hyperlink, or even this is interesting. This is a cross-reference between two different articles, right? Which you capture here. So if you look now here, it's interesting because we can basically say, we can see that. So this bit here is should be understood at, is short comprised, that's the deontic bit, then the defined terms, what terms have been defined here. Of course, the point here is not that it's 100% correct, is that now we can view this, we can review it, we can improve the connection. So like, for example, cross references, here there's two qualifiers, right? Here they are, and then key concepts defined here, right? So the logic is that we're capturing all of this, and suddenly we have this much more interesting hyperlink version. And then here you can see it as a graph, right? So for example, this is the graph that we're now seeing, right? Where you can see this risk management, which comes from there, that industry, and then you can sort of be the other bits that lead to here. So you can see this is like risk connects to this, right? And then you can see there's a definition of risk, right? And in fact, we can even see the definition of the act, or how they define risk in this particular case. And this goes into risk management system, which is now, for example, that one. And then this leads, for example, to ISO 301, right? And you can see, and of course, this is not complete, but it starts to be a way to navigate this. So even if we say, for example, step B, estimate and evaluate, then we can see where does it come from and where it goes there, right? Which is really cool. A couple of other interesting things here is when we start to map this, I would call the altitudes of this. What's the intent? Like 5 words for this, one sentence, compressed paragraph, and then the notation, right? This is actually a really cool way to start to represent in sort of mathematical notation what's happening here, which I think is also super powerful. And again, this is all connected from the brief, right? So you could see here, each of these, we then can see where it actually comes from, the text, right? So again, super, super powerful. That's the concept I show the graph. These are like starting to map, for example, this particular one, what, let's say, what are the tasks that we extract from here? So it's almost like, and this is important because eventually we're going to connect this to risk, right? So it's like, from this particular paragraph, what are the actions, what are the tasks that if we haven't done it, right, we don't, we probably in breach of this, or we don't have a good understanding. But the most important thing here is that once we complete the task, we can go and check the box. Say, hey, we've done this bit. We have on Article 9, identify and analyze, estimate, evaluate, and post-market. Because all of this is work that needs to be done, right? And that's very important. Then you have the grammar. The grammar is really cool, right? And I'm still exploring ways to map this. But the idea is to capture what is a determinator, what is a noun, what is a noun, what is basically a verb, right? And the way you read this is quite cool. It's like kind of like the way the LLMs is like you can see, look, the risk management system. So the relates to system, risk of the system, management of the system, and then the system shall be understood again, disconnect, and then understood as a continuous iterative process. But is the process that is iterative and is a continuous process, and so it's a really cool way to start to visualize this, and then we can kind of see, start to represent it as a tree. So the idea then is this will make it again mathematically way to connect the dots, which is super powerful, right? Then you got the bow tie, which is sort of the idea that you have a bunch of stuff connecting before, and after. So still trying to find a better way to visualize this. Right? It's already pretty cool, right? So you could see the regulation connects to chapter 3, section 2, article 9, paragraph 2. That's where we're connecting with the bow tie. And then from here, we connect all of those into there. So these are all the nodes that come from that guy there. And then the idea, for example, here is you apply these to summarization, right? So if you then have a description of here, so that's the description of a particular provider, then we transform that into this, where we start to see, again, the definitions of what it is, right? And we start to connect the dots, and then we can actually create the risks that come from it, which again is super powerful. So that's all you can do just from that one paragraph. And then here, I'll probably do a couple of videos on this. So these are just previous experiments that I've done around here on connecting this, connecting the flows, again, variations of that. This is actually using a particular example with multiple bits, but it's still pretty cool, early experiments. But the whole idea is to connect paragraphs, right? Is to connect basically text like this into the actual bits that they mean, right? And all the concepts that are defining. So you have a much more understanding of the paragraph that we have in front of us.